Welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this episode of the Crexi Podcast, an insider's look at all things commercial real estate. In this show, we cover a broad range of topics that cater to both CRE newcomers and industry leaders alike. I'm your host, Shanti Ryle, Director of Content Marketing here at Crexi, and today we are very excited to sit down with none other than Topher Stephenson, who is Head of Operations at Aspire Commercial. Before we dive in, a little bit about our guest. Topher Stephenson joined Aspire Commercial, a commercial real estate brokerage based in Houston, Texas, in 2024 as head of operations. He directs the company's operations and marketing strategy while leading efforts to leverage AI technology in CRE workflows, which is the meat and potatoes of what we will be discussing today. Topher also provides keynote presentations on how to use AI in commercial real estate and at industry conferences and private company trainings, both online and in person around the country, and also provides AI and automation consulting services to select partners. With over a decade of experience, he brings expertise in brokerage management, CRE marketing, and ops, specializing in practical applications of AI and emerging technologies. Previously, Topher served as managing director at the Boulos Company. Is that correct?
Bolus Company.
Bolus Company, at the Bolus Company, Northern New England's largest commercial real estate brokerage. He began his career as director of real estate marketing at Atlantic National Trust, pioneering innovative marketing strategies for commercial properties nationwide. Topher holds a BS in Health Policy and Administration, ooh, interesting, from Pennsylvania State University, and a master's in Business Analytics from the University of Maine. Topher, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Oh, yeah. I am very much looking forward to this conversation. For people who don't know, just to give a little preamble, Topher is probably one of the most prominent voices on what's going on in the world of AI as it pertains to commercial real estate. It's a hot button word. Everybody wants to talk about it, but not a lot of people understand it or know how to cut through the noise. Topher does. So I'm very, very excited to.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Just tooting your horn a little bit, but no, I'm really, really excited to get into it. But, before we get into the meat and potatoes of AI and commercial real estate, I'd love to tee up a little bit more about you, how you even got into the space in the first place. So let's chat about it. How did you first get into commercial real estate?
Yeah, great question. So I came from a digital marketing background. I started my career with Red Bull North America, somewhat briefly after college, and then moved on and was working at a digital marketing agency startup. And that was a lot of fun, over the course of Red Bull, doing stuff with Red Bull in college, digital marketing startup, learned a lot about just kind of, best in class digital marketing best practices. But working at a digital marketing agency startup doesn't pay a whole ton of money. And so I was looking for something that did. And eventually answered a Craigslist ad that was looking for a real estate marketing analyst. And I had no idea what that meant. I'm pretty sure the company that posted the ad had no idea what that meant. But, I just kind of interviewed with them, started hearing about what they were doing, and just kind of like very quickly fell in love with the idea of working in commercial real estate. So that was kind of the genesis of, my launch into commercial real estate, starting on the, property marketing side. Essentially it was just a group that owned commercial properties throughout the country, all different shapes and sizes, different flavors of ice cream, some distressed stuff, some really cool stuff, some great markets, some bad markets. And it's all just kind of, all right, who's going to use or buy this thing? How do we get the word out to them? Let's try to make the phone ring and then try to put a deal together. So it was just kind of a really good launch pad into, kind of experiencing commercial real estate, like across the spectrum of asset classes, across the spectrum of different submarkets, different places throughout the country, and figuring out who would actually want to, use or buy one of these properties. So
Yeah,
yeah. And so that was
absolutely.
a fun way for me to get started. And, eventually the phones were ringing off the hook so much that they actually started letting me talk to the people that were interested in these properties, and eventually started negotiating some of the deals. So kind of pivoted from, hey, I'm just doing the marketing to, in-house leasing and sales for different projects across the country. And then eventually got recruited to, kind of run and scale and systematize a brokerage company. And so that's how I got involved with the Bolus Company. And that was fantastic experience, really, really great group of people doing some pretty fantastic things in brokerage. But I think you know this story. Eventually, I met Brandon Avedikian on Twitter, and we just kind of hit it off. We were really excited about all the same things, leveraging marketing, doing social media, working with technology and AI, and just decided we should team up and, try to really rev things up at Aspire Commercial that he had started working on about a year beforehand. So it's crazy to think I just summarized over a decade of time, in 2.5 minutes. But yeah, it's been a lot of bobbing and weaving, a lot of doing a lot of different things. But
Yeah.
I've kind of worn a lot of different hats in the industry, and I've loved every minute of it.
Yeah. And it's a common thread I hear on this show of basically just learning the skills you need to learn to do whatever the challenge is right in front of you out
Yeah,
of necessity. You got to just get it done. So, okay, I better start building the skill. And then that's how you build out your full rotation of tools in your tool belt to tackle challenges. So, definitely
yeah.
sounds like you've done that. Entering commercial real estate 10 years ago, over 10 years ago,
Hmm.
it strikes me as a very interesting time to start forming the foundation of your understanding of not only the market, but also how you kept your eye on what digital marketing and, compared to traditional marketing
Yeah.
tools have been around and have developed in the last 10 years or so. Um, it's crazy to think Crexi turns 10 this year, for example. So things
Wow.
things
No
can really
kidding.
change in 10
Yeah.
years. So I'm
Absolutely.
curious, are there any stories of kind of as you were building out the commercial real estate side of your skill set and really understanding the market so much so you started actually participating in brokering deals? Are there any fun stories you can tell us, kind of like in the early days of bringing technology and commercial real estate together that strike you as a little bit more foundational to at least your experience?
Yeah, I mean, some things change and some things stay the same. When I first got started, I love in my intro that you said I was pioneering very innovative, digital marketing strategies. That's true in the sense that I was doing things that were very innovative in commercial real estate at the time. But really, if you look at any other industry, they were kind of just digital marketing regular things. I
Mhm.
wouldn't even necessarily
Mhm.
say best practices, and so just boilerplate stuff like, okay, we have a property, like obviously you're gonna put up a sign, obviously you're gonna put up an online listing, but what other tools are in the toolbox that can actually help you get this specific property in front of the highest and best user or buyer or tenant for that property, and that was kind of part of the fun of working in that position because it does change from property to property and from market to market. But I think one example I always go back to is there was a newsletter advertisement that you could buy through one of these real estate marketing platforms. I'm not going to name the name, but essentially everyone thought it was just a newsletter of a bunch of different cool properties that they picked, but really it was just one that you could run an ad in. And
Mm.
it wasn't all that expensive. I didn't know anybody doing it, but it was something like $1,200 to get an advertisement in front of every single investor in this giant listing platform's database. I was just kind of running the math on the numbers of like how many people would see it. And I was like, that's why is nobody doing this? It seems like a really good deal. It's probably too good to be true. But we didn't have any other ideas on this specific property, so we tried it out and we let it rip. Our phone was just ringing off the hook. We put this giant multifamily property under contract in days. We're like,
Wow.
wow, really? It's not that it's too good to be true. Just no one's really like trying and taking advantage of these different tools that are out there. So, we kind of leaned on that advertisement for a good amount of time because it's like, wow,
Sure.
okay, multifamily's hot. We get a bunch of multifamily properties. We could probably do that again. So
Yeah.
we just kind of let it rip.
Or
And
once
all
it
of a
sells,
sudden,
you can just say like, "Oh, well, I have this other property for you," and then there's another lead potentially.
oh yeah, exactly. I mean that's essentially what happened. Like we were kind of leaning pretty heavily on that, particular e-blast for a while. But over time, we were getting all these different investors from across the
Mhm.
country that were filling out this form on our website. And then eventually, we set up an automation that automatically takes those people over to, a CRM. And we didn't have a
Yeah.
CRM originally, but all of a sudden we had all these people flocking in. And it's like, okay, we should probably have something together, where we're tracking all these people and what they're interested in. And so eventually that advertisement went away and it wasn't an option anymore, and we were worried for a second, but then we looked at our list and we were like, we don't really need it anymore. We have like this
Mm,
giant list of investors all across the country interested in these different kinds of assets.
sure.
So again, some things change, some stay the same, but just using a CRM, people reaching out about different types of properties and actually tracking what they're interested in so that if an opportunity comes up, you could just find those people and send it to them. And
Hmm.
so there's
Hmm.
some things you can do that are pretty fancy. There's some things you can do that are just very simple. And if you do something simple like that, just, hey, this is what these people are interested in. I got a new opportunity. I'm going to send it to those people. So many brokers, so many commercial real estate owners, so many commercial real estate investors just don't even do that. And if you did, you'd be pretty far ahead of the curve.
Yeah, I'm curious, in so much as you've been like an operational leader at the companies you've worked at, building out their tech stacks and processes with a mind towards, how can these tools make us our best selves? Are there, other than the CRM, which is fundamental, are there any tools or types of tools that you think, it's 2025, these are now essential that brokerages or other commercial real estate firms need to have in their toolkit versus are there any that you think are just a little more on the fluff side and maybe are better serve people who are more advanced from a technology perspective if they want to go that direction or just fluff on the far end.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I mean, it does kind of depend because you probably know this, like every brokerage is very different, every ownership group is very different. I could give a AI presentation to 100 people, that are just in brokerage, and they would all find different things where they're like, wow, that's the thing, like
Mm,
that's going to save me a lot of time. And so it really does kind of depend, but I can go kind of based on what I've seen be very successful and what I know has been helpful for others. And one
mm,
is, a CRM that is, not just something that tracks your information, not just something that is well built out and can provide you with high quality data, but one that you've built in a way that is simple enough that people will actually use it, because that's kind of like the biggest downfall with that kind of technology. It's, oh, we're going to build out this wildly, amazing, complex data source that has our properties and they're connected to the comps and they're connected to the contacts and who's buying and who's selling and
yeah.
who's filling out all of that data. Is anybody doing it? And
Yeah.
if
Yep.
you don't have that set up, it just none of that's going to work. It's going to be so complicated that no one wants to use it. So that's one piece of it is, less about the platforms that you're using and more how do you make it simple enough for everybody to do the right thing so that everyone can actually benefit, from these platforms that you're using.
Hmm.
And, if I was to make a more general recommendation of something that would be helpful to like every brokerage, it's kind of a boring recommendation, but it would be project management software. It's just
Hmm.
everybody's doing all of these different things across the board. Everybody's like requesting them via email, and then all of a sudden, something was requested and it never goes online or it never goes to the right party. And it's like, oh, why did that possibly happen? It's because everyone's getting 1,000 emails.
Mm.
So even just something as simple as, hey, every time we're doing something in our brokerage, somebody fills out a form, and maybe you don't like filling out a form, but you're going to like everything that happens next because that form goes into a project management software. It
Yeah.
automatically notifies the right person who's supposed to do it. They submit it for approval. It automatically notifies the next person. They leave a comment. It notifies the next person, and nothing gets forgotten about, and everything kind of moves through the funnel. So
Yeah.
unfortunately, I think my most general recommendation would be that. It's kind of a
Yeah.
boring one, but it's just how you can make sure stuff gets done and things kind of keep moving.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting. I want to highlight what you said. You're not going to like filling out the form, but you're going to like what happens next. I think something that's really difficult, besides the whole vetting process of doing the research on a particular tool, like trying to understand what it actually does, where do my needs align with it, and then, okay, I'm going to pay for it. The
Hmm.
onboarding process of a new tool it can be a lot because you have to change your behavior and not only yours, your team's behavior
Yeah.
to get the most bang for your buck out of this investment. And I'm curious, how do you think about, you can't say it's for your own good, like take your medicine necessarily, but maybe it is a form of like how do you convince a group that this change is good and empower them to embrace the process change? Because I feel like that's, to keep going on this tangent, that's something you encounter sometimes in, firms that have been doing it a certain way for a very long time. They're like, this
Yeah.
method works for me and I don't want to adapt. I don't want to change what I'm doing. How do you pivot the framing on that for these folks?
Yeah, I mean, I think to some extent you do have to show people what's in it for them. It's like, hey, we're not just doing this for the sake of doing it. And you also don't want to do that. It's like that
Hmm.
that's something that I would mention. I'll give these presentations across the country on things you can do with AI, and people ask, okay, what of these are you doing at Aspire? And the answer is not all of them. We
Mm.
can't do all of them. There's an opportunity cost, to spending your time on doing all these different things. And so we have to pick the ones that are important for our business, the ones that are actually going to help save people time as opposed to just cost people time. And that takes time, to decide, to figure out how, what's going to be the difference between just something Topher's doing, between, something our designer's doing, or something the whole team is doing, or what's something that's going to happen automatically in the background that's just going to benefit everybody.
Mm.
If you try to do everything at once, you're going to fail, and so to some extent you got to be able to pick your battles, and you should be picking those battles based on, hey, what's actually going to provide the benefit, what is actually going to save people's time, what is actually going to make the company more efficient so that people can be out there doing more deals. And assuming you're making decisions in that way, hopefully you can speak to the fact that, like, hey, this is why we're doing this. It's
Yeah.
this new, what could be anything. It could be something as boring as a commission processing platform that you're rolling out, and it's like, hey, you're not going to love filling out this form, but you're going to love getting paid on time and having the information be correct every
Yeah.
single time. And something that extends to for us is, just, I hate going back to the concept of a CRM, but like, we are a young company, and so we are still building out our CRM. And, we beat the drum all the time that, like, hey, the reason we're doing this is we want to enable you folks to be able to do more
Mm.
deals. And we want to be able to track the deals that we have in the pipeline so that we move things along and so that you guys actually make money. And it's always, when you're rolling these things out, you don't necessarily know what people's attitude is going to be and how much they're going to embrace things versus kind of, bucket things. But the way that we've been building it out and the way that I've been beating the drum, and Brandon, probably more so, Brandon's been beating the drum on the CRM,
Mm.
is that, even the people responsible for inputting the data, which is probably the least fun part of using the CRM, they want us to build it out more. They're like, hey, we want a place to, track this. And even though
Yeah.
we're going to have to be the person that goes and puts it into the system, it's like, this is going to make us a more powerful brokerage if we have this information in the system, And so, that almost makes people sound selfish. You have to show them what's in it for them, but you have to align things with incentives, right? Why would
Sure.
someone want to do something that's just going to take them more time and not save them any time?
Sure.
And the other piece of it is, you got to try to make it easy on people. If I think the CEO of the first commercial real estate company I ever worked for said, everybody wants to do the right thing. You just have to make it easy on them to do the right thing.
Mm.
If they get to that thing, it's like, I have no idea what button to press. Like, maybe they do the right thing. They probably tried to, but they might click the entirely wrong thing and send,
Yeah.
you
They'd
know, a
rather
text
not
instead.
click than
Yeah,
mess up
exactly.
something.
Yeah, shut this down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just close
So,
this laptop.
I don't know if
No.
that's the perfect answer because I think it's different for every group, but
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there is, I think, something else to kind of add to the incentive structure is it gets easier. The
yeah,
more you build it into your workflow and your habits to engage with whatever tool it is, the more it becomes second nature, and there's a network effect of the whole team is now contributing to it and it's building out
100%.
this really robust system. So, it's like if nobody used Facebook, it wouldn't be a great social media platform because it relies
Right.
on its users, right?
Yeah,
So there is a good incentive to get everybody on board, and it makes the team better. I
yeah,
think is an interesting point, not just the individual better.
absolutely.
Um,
No, that's a great point.
yeah. So I do want to zoom back a little bit. You're experimenting with all these different things. Not everything that you decide that you experiment with, you implement at Aspire. You're also traveling all over, giving these talks, doing consultant work. So I'm curious in in this very rapidly changing AI driven landscape, what does a typical week look like for you?
Yeah, that is a fantastic
Doing all this
question.
stuff.
It's definitely changed a lot, over the last 10 months. It could be a mix of a lot of things. Again, we're a young company at Aspire, and so, I don't want to say our priorities are always changing, but like there's always more to be done. And,
Mm,
the way I look at operations is I think a lot of people look at operations as in like, hey, you're managing things and you're making sure everything is getting done and you're kind of making sure things happen on time. That's all true. I kind of try to look at things as in, okay, how can we build this up so that like if I were hit by a bus tomorrow, I don't necessarily have, everything's going to be fine because everything's going to kind of keep moving
yeah,
anyway. And so
yeah.
the way I frame my week is kind of, what can I do that's in the service of that? If there's something that
Mm,
I'm like bottlenecking every single day, it's not necessarily how do I get this off my plate, but how do we kind of operationalize this so that like I'm not the sticking point kind of keeping this from happening.
mm,
So I know that's a very vague answer, but I spend some of my time thinking about that and then
yeah.
ultimately some of my time every week trying to execute on that. And then there's just kind of key projects as we go. I harped on project management earlier when I first got to Aspire. We had just contracted some, overseas folks on our operations team, and they were all pretty fresh to the industry, pretty fresh to Aspire. We were a very fresh company, and so a lot of the first 3 months was okay. We got to figure out what we're doing. Like we
Hmm.
know what we're
Hmm.
doing as a company, but these people don't necessarily know where their role fits into each of these processes. The brokers don't all know like who's doing what. They might CC some person when it's supposed to go to another person, and it's hard to necessarily know who everybody is if you're not in the same office. And so that's
Yeah.
part of the reason we said, okay, let's focus on process documentation. Then we're going to leverage that process documentation to build out the project management so that again, when someone fills out that form that maybe they don't like doing, they're gonna like the fact that it went to the right person, the fact that everything gets done and it kind of goes smoothly. And so that was kind of
Hmm.
a key project for 3 months or so.
Yeah.
And then eventually it was, hey, okay, we've got really good systems in place, we've got a really good operations team in place, but now the brokers need some more, analytical support. So we got to hire some good analysts. So we found a couple of rock star analysts, and I realized, holy smokes, we got to train these analysts. And so that was kind of a key priority. And
Sure.
again, how do we train these analysts? How do we kind of expose them to everything? But this is kind of our first time doing that specifically, and so how do we kind of structure things so that the next time we bring one on, it just gets easier and easier and easier every time. And so it's kind
Mm,
of what is kind of the key project at hand? How do we take that key project and kind of operationalize it so that next time we're doing it, it just gets easier and easier? And over the course of time, there's different things sprinkled in. Like obviously, we're revving up our CRM. We're trying to use AI in a combination of different ways, and so it's always kind of what is the big project? Like where are we focusing the majority of the energy? How do we make it so that we're structuring things and systematizing things so that all of these projects kind of take a little bit and a little bit less effort as time goes
mm,
on. And as we're going and we're finding opportunities where we're saying, hey, this is either taking, too much of my time or too much of Brandon's time or too much of somebody's time. How can we somehow automate a piece of that with AI? And so
mm.
again, can't do everything at once, but it's just a matter of figuring out what is the highest bang for our buck right now, what's the key priority, and then how can we build onto it from there.
Yeah. It's a ongoing uh conversation, definitely, because some things can be really, really timely and you're like, yeah, this is for sure a priority. I'm curious, do you ever have any instances where something is like kind of mid to lower priority and you just kind of keep pushing it off to the side and realize, oh, we've never actually addressed that?
That definitely happens. Priorities
Yeah.
change, but things have a way of kind of recirculating, and I'm
Sure.
pretty good at keeping track of that kind of stuff, and so nothing's
Yeah,
ever going to get forgotten about. It's just a matter of whether or not it's a priority right now. And
totally.
sorry, I kind of got caught up in my answer. That's really the mostly the kind of Aspire side of the equation. On
Yeah.
on the AI stuff, it's all kind of weaved in together to some extent, but obviously I spend a decent amount of my time just kind of staying in the loop, seeing what's out there. Once I see something that could be applied to commercial real estate, I try to find some way to battle test it. Sometimes it's something that I'll know, based on my previous experience on the deal side or the marketing side, that, hey, this is something that somebody could use in commercial real estate. And it
Mm-hmm.
might not be us right this second, but that's something that I want to let people know about. Or it's something that, hey, this is something we should probably be leveraging, whether it be something we want to try to automate on the company side or something that we want to expose, the brokers and the team to. And so it's kind of a matter of sucking in a whole bunch of information, trying to suss out what I think can actually be useful. And then obviously I'm creating content about that and kind of weaving it into my presentations. And then at some point, I actually go and give one of these presentations as well. So from a week to week, changes quite a bit, but it's kind of some combination of that smorgasbord.
Oh, yes. Yeah, there is something new coming out about AI almost every day, it feels like.
Exactly. Yeah.
um, yeah, and I do want to touch on a little bit on really how generous you are with the research and exploring that you're doing in the AI space. Like I said earlier in the episode, you're very vocal about all your learnings. You post videos of experiments you're running online so people can just see what you're doing, which is really valuable. I'm curious, kind of philosophically speaking, what is this impetus behind that sharing? Like, what do you hope to do with being so present in the social media, digital marketing space with other commercial real estate folks that are in it? And, what do you hope to achieve or share with them?
Yeah. That's a fantastic question. I mean, it kind of started with, obviously we're both on social media. It's like everyone kind of talks about whatever their niche expertise is on social media. And, when AI started becoming more prevalent, I was already kind of posting content around like, hey, just kind of general technology in the commercial real estate space. And, how should you think about, operating and marketing and kind of all these different components. And, people felt that information was good for what it's worth. And so that's great. But all of a sudden, when I started posting, about ways that I was starting to incorporate I could just sense that people were very excited about that, and some, on one hand, did I to some extent start to lean into that because people are excited about it? Yes. But also just the fact that people are excited about technology as it pertains to commercial real estate. It's kind of the first time I've ever seen that in a big way. And
Mm.
so that's what really excites me about it, because as you know, it's an industry that tends to get left behind in a lot of ways as it pertains to technology. And it just feels like we have a chance, for the first time we can kind of like get ahead of this curve, and be leveraging things
Yeah.
in big ways and kind of understand what's going on in the technology ecosystem and just, not
Yeah.
kind of be dinosaurs. And so,
As a
you know,
CRE tech person, I won't take that personally.
yeah.
People who aren't interested.
Well, obviously there's
I'm
forces for
totally
good
kidding.
in that ecosystem. There's just not all that many of them,
Yeah.
is what it comes down to. And so,
Again, it's hard to change. It's hard to change when you have established ways of doing things that work. And yeah, if AI is the thing that get people super stoked about it and want to dive all in, hell yeah, right?
yeah,
I was
absolutely.
just at the Globe Street Women of Influence conference a week ago now, and AI was one of the panels there. The room was packed with people, so packed. And it was just like, a conversation with the panelists. How are you looking at AI for what you specifically do at your company? What are things to keep in mind? Like, what are questions we should be asking when we're vetting vendors, or like privacy issue concerns we should have, or just question. People are really energized by it, I've noticed. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm sure you
absolutely.
feel that in your conversations online
Oh,
too.
I 100% do. And I mean, kind of going back to your question of what makes me excited about it, or, what philosophically am I looking for in it? I've had a lot of conversations with people where maybe they kind of don't know where to start, or I'll give a presentation and people are kind of asking about where to start. And again, everyone kind of sees one thing where they have a light bulb moment and they just realize, like, oh, wow, this could could really change things. And I remember one person in particular, I won't name drop them, but they were talking about ChatGPT, and they were just discussing the day they realized, like, oh, you can upload a PDF to ChatGPT and you can talk to your documents. And all of a sudden they had a light bulb moment of just like, this is going to be an amazing technology and it's going to be really useful for me. And so I think philosophically, like what I enjoy about kind of providing the education and giving presentations is I like to see people have some sort of light bulb moment, especially if they're just kind of at the point where they're feeling lost and they think, I know I should be doing it, but I have no idea how to get started. And I kind of at least expose them to one thing where they see it and think, wow, that's going to be something where it's actually going to save me a lot of time and I got to get on this train. That's something that gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah, you got an educator's heart. That's
I
my
guess so. I never would have thought, but
that's my sneaky conspiracy theory is that most people on Retweet in another life would have been teachers.
I could definitely see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Bethany Babcock, she would have been a great teacher.
Yona Weiss was a teacher.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Wow. Oh, I had no idea.
shout out to them. But I think people really love sharing their knowledge. And that's something I love just about this industry before we move on to AI itself, is just everyone is so generous with their knowledge and their
100%.
experience and happy to have conversations with you and build relationships with you about those topics or over those topics. And very, very heartwarming stuff.
It's amazing, just kind of the connections that, obviously real estate's a local industry and, that's fantastic and it's good to have a local network, but just the fact that you can get on there, and meet someone like yourself, we're literally on opposite sides of the country and here we are doing a podcast together. Thanks in part to Strip Mall Guy and the gala and us actually meeting in person, but
Yes.
just the people that are on there sharing different kinds of knowledge, it's just absolutely incredible and it is really cool to see.
Through technology.
Through technology.
Through Riverside, here we are. Shout out to Riverside. All right, well, let's get into the dang thing. So, AI, CRE tech, what is exciting you most right now from an AI perspective?
Oh man, I feel like I already said this one. I mean, so what excites
Is it the
me?
PDF?
No. I mean, what excites me is just the fact that people are excited about it.
Yeah.
It's like again, that's kind of like, why I'm pushing so hard for this and
Yeah.
why I'm so kind of passionate about it.
On the tech side, though, like specifically, what tools or what and
Yeah. No, and I know I'm picking up what you're putting down. So to me, I'm most excited about the automation side and just the
so agents.
ease. Not, I mean, okay, there's a lot of different definitions of the word agent,
We'll backtrack. Don't worry.
yeah, I mean that term kind of gets thrown around so much that it's difficult to even know what it means anymore. But to me, there's kind of three key steps with learning to leverage AI. It's, hey, you got to kind of test these different tools that are out there. You don't have to test all of them, but somehow you got to get exposed to them. You have to poke at a couple that you think are actually going to be helpful to you and save you time and experiment with them. See if they actually do save you time. Because if you try to do something with it and it takes you twice as long to, proofread what you just wrote with ChatGPT because it has so many mistakes, it's like, okay, that's probably not a great example. Maybe you want to move on and find something else. But eventually you'll find some use cases, that really, really do save you time. And then once you've done that, a lot of these different platforms, you can kind of customize them to work for you. You can customize them to do very specific tasks. And so, every major platform kind of has their own version of this, but you can customize ChatGPT so that every time you open that instance of ChatGPT, it just knows what you want it to do. So if could be something as simple as, hey, we manage properties and we draft a lot of letters to our tenants. And so this custom GPT is an example of one of those letters in this GPT, and you've written the instructions inside this GPT so that it knows, I'm going to provide you a handful of bullet points about this letter, and you're going to draft it based on this example. and I can just fire up that custom GPT, give you these bullet points, and know that you're going to give me a consistently formatted letter every single time. And you don't got to worry about memorizing some, magic prompt, that you pumped into it to get it to do the perfect letter that one time. It just
Mm.
already knows what you want it to do. And so there's a
Mhm.
million different ways you could do that. People will use that to summarize different kinds of very meaty documents, and you can break these instructions into different steps so that it's, hey, here's a document, pull me this. Now pull me this. Now pull me this. Now compare this against this. Now
Mhm.
compare all of that, whatever it is. Maybe you're analyzing an investment deck, and you could have the final step of your custom GPT be compare all those numbers to this investment deck for a property I actually bought. And those
Mm.
are all things that, a custom version of ChatGPT or one of these other platforms is very, very capable of doing.
Mhm.
And so finally, if you can customize one of these tools to do one of those tasks for you, there's a decent chance that you can automate it. And so again, people throw around the term agents. I wouldn't necessarily always call them an agent, but I just think about it in terms of, can I automate AI to do something? It doesn't
Mm.
necessarily have to be an agent, but it could be, okay, I've received a specific email with a specific subject line, and now AI is going to pull this thing out of it, and then it's going to do this thing with the information, and then it's going to take that information and do whatever you want with it. Maybe it emails it back to you, maybe it maps it to a database, maybe it sends you a Slack message with it. But
Mm.
the more you can figure out what is AI actually going to save you time with, and then the more you can customize AI to do that very consistently every time. If you can do it very consistently every time, there's a good chance you can automate it based on a specific thing happening that's already happening anyway. And
Totally.
so an example of that, part of the reason I'm so excited about automations, and this kind of goes back to, our project management platform, and hey, we have all these processes rolled out. There's so many things already running through our project management platform that we can rig up automations that say, hey, this document was just uploaded to this project management platform. Now, every time that happens, we're going to do something with that information, and it's going to, execute a task that either I or Brandon or someone else in the company would otherwise have to do that maybe they
Mhm.
don't have time to do. And it's going to enable us to do more, not just kind of do less. It's going to
Yeah.
enable us to do things that we otherwise just wouldn't have done before. So that's a long way of saying I'm excited about, different sorts of automation platforms, be
Yeah.
it, an agent or just something like Zapier or Relay that kind of
Yeah.
connects to AI and can get it to do some cool stuff.
Yeah. I have my own philosophical thoughts about any kind of personification of a GPT or a large language model, but we can talk about that offline. Automation. They don't need a personality. Though some people do give them personalities.
You can
Um,
do that. You can customize that.
you can. Yeah, I'm scared to. I don't want to trust it. I want to tell it to do what I
Mm.
want.
Should we talk more
But
about
that's
that?
me. That, huh?
Should we talk more about that?
If you want it, I don't know if it leans as much commercial real estate
Okay,
necessarily, but
that's fair. Yeah,
I will talk offline. But my short answer is I do think there is value in remembering that these are tools and tools should work for you, right? They
absolutely.
don't have their own personality. They're just a predictive set that is predicting the most likely next character in an answer, in a sequence of answers that will be what you want and you will affirm it. So it's being built by how you interact with it.
Yeah,
And I think, especially when it
pattern
comes
recognition.
to commercial real estate, you want to interact with it in such a way that it will, you don't need it to be your therapist. Some people use it as a therapist, which I'm like, power to you.
Right.
You just need to
Yeah.
talk
I
to
mean,
someone. But, in the realm of tools, it is a very powerful tool. And
100%. You just don't want it to have a personality.
no, I'd rather just do the task.
I'm
And if
okay
it's
with that.
automated, you don't even have that interaction with it, right? You remove that step of
Exactly. You
needing to
don't even need to
interface with
open
it.
up the AI. Yeah.
Yeah.
You could just send an email and then automatically have ChatGPT write you an email as your therapist, telling you why you shouldn't have said it that way.
All sorts of rabbit holes to go down here. I'm curious, in all these conversations you've had with different folks in the real estate world, what is the most common misconception you come across? Or if not misconception, maybe objection to AI?
Um, no, I mean, I think misconceptions are pretty common. I would say there's two, and they're kind of at the opposite ends of the spectrum.
Hmm.
One is, hey, like I got to get myself ready, to jump into using AI, or, I got to wait for the perfect time, or like, man, I said 2025 was going to be the year, but like I just don't feel ready to do it. I'm a pretty firm believer that you can't get started without getting started, and so again, it kind
Mm.
of goes back to that just step one of the different levels of using it. You just have to try it. You don't have to commit to, I'm gonna do these specific five things with it. You gotta test it out, see if you can actually get it to do something useful, and then you can
Mm.
kind of build onto it from there. And then the flip side of the spectrum, and then, this is kind of common in brokerage, is people just assume that the really complicated things are really easy, and I was just
Mm.
giving a presentation and chatting with their IT person prior to, giving the presentation. Is like, we got to be a little careful about how we frame some of this stuff, because people are going to see these examples and just think like, oh, our IT guy can just turn this on, like that's going to be simple. And, I kind of glossed over a piece of the automation stuff. If you can customize AI to do something for you, there's a good chance you can automate it to happen. But part of the reason it's easier for us to do some automations is like I mentioned earlier, we took like 3 months to map out our processes and kind of build those into a project management system.
Mhm.
That's probably not an exciting portion of this interview. Hopefully, we didn't lose
Yeah.
too many listeners. But the fact is like that. That's kind of a piece
Yeah, I
that
do
you
want
have
to
to do.
interject with something that you just said. Having your processes written down
Yeah,
as a means of being able to effectively communicate them to a model or to an agent or as a part of building an automation. That is so important. And I mean,
100%.
maybe not as important, but I can imagine that in a lot of brokerages, there's a lot of knowledge that just is verboten, right? Like
Yeah,
you know this process is what it is because you've just done it that way. It's not written
exactly.
down, it's just communicated somehow verbally in the ether and everybody internalizes it.
100%.
You cannot get a GPT to internalize it if it can't pull from anything. You have to have a document. I mean, you can, and I've been experimenting with this. I was scared to give it my voice for a while, but
Yeah,
whatever. The podcast is here. Um, you can verbalize instructions, but then you realize just how quirky and perhaps riddled with miscommunication or errors and how hard it is to communicate effectively.
yeah.
Writing down things and making them concrete really shapes a process.
100%. Yeah. And people don't always want to hear that. I'll
Yeah.
people will reach out to me and say, "Hey, we'd love to bring you on as an AI consultant." And it's like, "Hey, okay, what do you want to do?" And so, "Oh, we want to do these three things." Okay, how are you doing them now? And everybody has different answers and everyone's on the completely different pages. And it's like,
Yeah.
that's fine. It's working that way now, but like if you're going to get a machine to do it, even if you wanted to hire a person to do it tomorrow, like how much easier would it be to do
Mm-hmm.
that if you already had that written down and you could just hand it to them and say, "Hey, you're going to have questions, but like here's what you're doing." It's going to be a lot easier for them to get up and running. It's
Mm-hmm.
very similar if you're trying to get an AI to do it. And so even something as simple as summarizing a lease agreement, using AI. If you just tell it summarize this lease, what does that mean exactly? There's a lot of information in there. Do you want it to decide what's important, or do you want to spell out step by step, hey, these are the
Mm-hmm.
things that I want to see every time you summarize one of these leases? And then that's what you can build into your customized GPT so that every time you go to that GPT, it's not just going to be deciding what does it mean to summarize a lease. It's going to be pulling
Mm-hmm.
out the same exact things that you're looking for every time you're trying to use it. And because you've given it specific directions, it's going to get less confused when it's looking for information because it's not going to be trying to, digest a giant document at once. It's just going to kind of zip into that specific information and pull it and retrieve it for you. And so, that's just kind of on the customizing side. When you're getting into the, hey, how do I automate something? That's where your process gets even more important because, the thing about automations is you have to trigger an automation somehow. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're building an automation that's just for you, you can have that automation be whatever you want. Maybe it's we put a file in a specific folder and that triggers an automation. Or, for us, it's, hey, we uploaded a document to a project management system and that triggers an automation. Or maybe it's just I received an email and I put it in a folder. But if you're going to be doing this across a team, everyone needs to be on the same page because that thing that
Mm,
you do to kick off automated AI, it's got to be the same every time you do it. Otherwise, it's not going to fire up and it's not going to happen. And so,
totally.
again, that's kind of the boring news no one wants to hear about AI and automation is
Well,
there
that,
is some upfront work that you actually have to
yeah.
do if you want to automate this stuff.
Yeah, and you want to be able to know what instructions you've given it because if it's doing something automatically and it messes up, you need to be able to look into what exactly you told it and figure out
Yeah.
why that mistake was made because otherwise you basically have to start over again, which
Yeah,
is a whole other bunch of work. It's an
100%. Yeah.
eerie parallel to making a bad hire almost at an industry where if you break the wrong hire, you've already spent all that time onboarding them. And if it doesn't work out,
Yeah.
you lose a lot of dollars in
Yeah. And the
releasing that
long
person and then trying to bring somebody else on
And
and
it's
teaching them
also
again.
similar in that the longer it goes on, the more time and money is wasted. Because if you don't have a
Exactly.
process in place for, okay, how are we checking the quality of this information that AI is pumping out? How long is that going on for before you realize that, wow, we have a lot of useless output that, either just got emailed to somebody or put in our database. And it's,
Yeah,
similar if you're hiring somebody, it's like, hey, if it's not working, you got to figure out how to address something relatively quickly. You don't want to just kind
totally.
of stew on it and let it keep going.
So I have two directions that we can go from here. I'm going to let you pick. Have a
Mm,
little fun.
sure.
Um, One direction. Oh my God, I forgot the second one. I don't know, but I know the first one still.
Okay. On the one
Never mind. We're
option.
going with that one. Uh, on the subject of you could hire a person to do that versus an AI versus whatever. Or where do you draw the distinction between this is the task or problem I'm facing and need to solve? Would a new hire be the best bet? Would doing the customization of AI be our best bet, or would bringing on an AI based vendor be our best bet? I remember the second question.
Okay, sure.
Um, it was something to do with as a startup. Uh, nope, I lost it again. We're just gonna go with the first question and see if I remember it.
Okay, okay.
I have too many thoughts about this. Can you
There's a lot
tell?
of thoughts. Yeah, there's a lot flying around.
So that was my question. Where do you decide between this needs to be a full-time person, this needs to be an automated AI that I can build, or this needs to be a vendor, somebody who's already built this tool, and then we're contracting with them to solve the
Yeah,
problem?
that's a great question. Can I think this one through just for a second? Because I have
Yeah.
thoughts, but I need to, okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, long story short, it's gonna be a little bit different for everybody just because brokerages, commercial real estate firms, even though they're in the same industry, a lot of them just operate wildly differently. But some things that you want to think about, A, do you or does anybody in your company even have an interest in getting their hands dirty? Because if you're going to try to automate something with AI, you kind of have to be in it for the long term. There's different things that can happen with it. You're going to have to maintain it. The way that you start it probably isn't going to be the way that you ultimately end up using it. You're going to
Mm,
build onto it. It's probably going to break at some point. You're going to have to fix it. You might have to even do the whole thing from scratch. And so that's one thing to consider. Do you even have anybody in house who kind of has this as a competency and is excited about it? If not, you should probably consider working with a consultant or at least meeting with a consultant to kind of see what's out there and to see what can be done. A lot of these folks that reach out, again, they know they want to start using AI, they just don't know where to start. And so you might not even be in a place where you're ready to start building out some kind of automation as a company. It kind of depends where you're at on that journey. And then the final piece of it is, do you actually want AI to execute this task? Is this something that you think can be done automatically? Is it very, very repetitive and you can count on AI to provide a very consistent output? A, you're probably going to have to run some experiments to see if that's the case. And if the answer is yes, it's probably a good candidate for automating something with AI. But if something is very, very ad hoc, if it changes a lot, if the process is very, very different every single time, you're probably going to need a human at least involved, in that process. It's probably not going to be something that you're going to be able to 100% delegate to AI and automation. And then, finally, even if you are able to delegate it to some kind of AI powered automation, you still might also need a human involved. So, even if you decide, hey, we don't need a human kind of running this from start to finish, we're going to have AI do some different components to it. AI still might only be doing it 90% correct. And so, depending on what that task is, maybe that's okay. Maybe it's something where you don't need 100% correct information every single time, but sometimes you will. And so, maybe AI does some of the work, and maybe the person that used to do that work is now double checking the information
Hmm.
that your AI automation is providing to you. So,
Sure.
there's a lot of different kind of ways to bob and weave depending on how your company operates, what your core competencies are, and whether or not you even have anybody at your organization that wants to do it. But
Mhm.
there's always a place for, people to tinker and try to do things internally. There's always a place for third parties, and there's always a place for working with actual people in the work as well.
I appreciate that overview, and I do actually remember what the second question was now, if you
Okay,
want to
great.
get into
Was
it.
that an okay answer? Was that usable? Sorry, I was
Oh,
stumbling through that one.
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. No, it's great. I think it's a interesting balance of, recognizing that AI processes will in fact create more work for you. Even if
Yeah.
they do have a net benefit of reducing other areas of work, especially things that are more mundane, they do require maintenance, they do require monitoring to a
Yeah.
certain extent. And, like we've just been discussing, the upfront work, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely. And
which,
another piece of that, sorry, I didn't mean to
oh
interrupt
no,
you.
go ahead.
Just something to kind of keep in mind if, every time I automate something with AI, like, yeah, I'm still getting AI to do that, but it's ultimately still my job. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily want everything to be my job. And so that's something that I always consider, when we're
Mm,
discussing, hey, is this something we want to try to automate with AI, or do we need to hire somebody? I don't necessarily want to be responsible for every single thing that happens in the company. And if I'm doing that with AI, it's my fault if that didn't go wrong or right. No matter what, there's still only so much managerial capacity, whether I'm managing human beings or managing machines that are doing
mm,
these different tasks. And so that's just something that you need to keep in mind as well. Do you want everything to come down to you being the person that's, monitoring these AI tools? Or do you want additional humans in the mix that can kind of
mm.
help get eyes on these things as you're building out different platforms?
Yeah, and that's where the hiring comes in, it sounds like.
Exactly.
Someone to share the mental load of being the babysitter of the machine.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that kind of leads nicely into my next question. And then I do want to make sure I have enough time to ask about some of your favorite tools that you see on the market right now.
Sure.
But from a startup perspective, a lot of the success of these different AI tools is having a written down process, a formalized process, and giving it to them.
Hmm.
But with both startups and I would say probably a lot of brokerages, the necessity of our industry to be flexible and be able to change and to really, meet the needs of each unique project is crucial, right? It just is part of what we do. So, how do you balance formalizing those processes with the knowledge that things will change because you have to be flexible and you have to be able to adapt?
Yeah, 100%. Do you mean more in terms of like processes for AI and technology, or more in terms of just kind of processes at a company in general?
Both. Because you assume that some of the processes of the company will eventually make their way into these tools, right? If
Yeah.
you do want to keep onboarding them.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point. Something Brandon actually said a couple of months ago is, if you are operationalizing mediocrity, you're just going to get more and more mediocre, And he didn't necessarily say that as like a knock on me or some things that we were doing. But just the general idea is you can't just fix everything by writing it down and creating a process document. At some point, people need to aspire to quality, and aspire
A.
to excellence, and that's very important. So, on the one hand, having everything written down and being able to hand that, to artificial intelligence or a person, probably in the reverse order most of the time,
Mhm.
is extremely important because it's going to just make life easier. If people know what they're supposed to be doing and when they're supposed to be doing it, and if they have a question, they can know where they're supposed to go to ask that question.
Mhm.
And if they, have access to training materials, they understand where all that information is and they know where they go to get it. It just makes everything more fluid and, easier for people to actually do their job. But, that comes with the caveat that things are always changing, and so people also need to be held to a certain responsibility of, hey, yeah, we did write that down a certain way, and yes, this is in that folder in case anytime you need to go check it. But also, we did send out a company email and made very clear that, hey, this particular thing is changing, and you should also know that. So I
Mm.
think it's an element of balancing. You want to make things easier for people because you want to make it easier to do the right thing, but there also has to be an element of personal responsibility, and there has to be an element of people actually need to want to strive for greatness. You
Mm.
can't just be doing the bare minimum because that's written down that that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. I believe that so much. I actually have it as a tattoo, the word strive. So
Drive?
I
No
very much
kidding.
agree with you. Very much agree with you.
That's awesome.
Um, all right. I want to be mindful of our time because we've been going for just about an hour now, and we could keep going for a long time yet. But I know you got a lot of
Good.
other things to do.
No, I've got time. I'm more cognizant of I'm starting to get hot without my AC, but I'll
Oh
be
yeah, yeah,
okay
yeah.
for a
We'll
while.
wrap it up. Rapid fire questions is where I was going, so I'm turning the
Good.
heat
Don't feel
up.
like you got to wrap it up. I have the time.
No, we're good. We're good. All right. So rapid fire questions. I do want to ask if you were handed $50 million today and you had to invest it in commercial real estate today, where would you park that money and why?
I'm probably not the best person to ask because I might be a little boring on this, but I'm kind of a fan of capping your downside, and so I don't have a giant amount of real estate personally, but we have a couple of places. One is in downtown Portland, kind of the heart of
Ooh,
downtown Portland,
yeah.
and when we bought it, it was kind of a big swing for us, but we were like, I don't think even if the economy takes a little bit of a dip, I think this blast zone of the absolute center of the city is
Hmm.
going to be fine. And so there's only so many things that can go wrong, with parking our money in that particular
Yeah.
location. And then
Portland, Maine, Portland, Oregon.
Portland, Maine. Yeah.
Okay. I was like, Portland, Oregon. How interesting. Please say more.
Yeah. And
Portland,
then
Maine. Got it.
next place we grabbed was a place in Cape Elizabeth with, well, you probably don't know what Cape Elizabeth is, but place right outside Portland with access to a little private beach. And so again, the idea
Okay.
being, hey, even if things go really, really sideways, people are drawn to the water, people like to go to the
Hmm.
beach, and someone's probably going to want to live in and rent this property. So if
Sure.
I had $50 million, I'd probably just be trying to find a lot of creative ways to do that.
Hmm.
Probably mixing it up a little bit and maybe buying some things where I think I could get a little risky, kind of dig in and add some value, but also
Hmm.
just a couple of things that, hey, this is probably not going to go down in value anytime soon. And
Sure.
then obviously I am long data centers for obvious reasons.
Why? Why? What's the reason? Oh yeah, data centers are a whole other conversation we can get into. Um,
Absolutely.
what, and this is not a trick question, it's a little bit of a trick question, are your favorite tools or softwares that you use on the job?
Crexi's great. Gotta love Crexi. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, yeah, Crexi is great. I think everybody knows Crexi's great. Um, some of my personal favorites right now, we were kind of talking about automations, and so I'm a big fan of a platform called the Relay app. None of this stuff is wildly simple. It all takes a little bit of learning and a little bit of tinkering to figure out how to automate something, but the Relay app makes it as easy as I've ever seen it to kind of get under the hood, start to kind of maybe connect your email to some sort of, automation or AI application and start to do some really cool things. And so I wouldn't go so far as to say it's easy, but it's the easiest that I've seen. And the
Mhm.
fact that it makes it so accessible to people so that you can start creating your own automations, I'd say that that definitely knocks it out of the park for me right
Yeah.
now.
Sounds like the digital equivalent of like, here's my handyman kit, like just your basic hammer, wrench,
Yeah,
screwdriver.
exactly. And it can
Yeah.
do some very, very fancy stuff. It just makes it very, very simple to interconnect everything and say, hey, I got this email now. I want AI to read the email and I want it to extrapolate some of that information and then do something with it.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
very, very big fan of the Relay app.
Absolutely. And then what is the craziest way that you have found a new, let's say, consultant client or just opportunity to speak about AI?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say that this is the craziest way that I've found a client, but a friend actually reached out to me about doing a presentation in Maine, and he works in, development, essentially donor fundraising,
Hmm.
and they're doing a conference for that, and they want someone to come speak about AI. And so I said, are you sure? Because I don't do that, right? Like that is not my field of domain expertise. Can't you
Hmm.
find somebody who, uses AI who's in that field? And he says, Topher, I think you're really overestimating how many people are effectively using AI in the state of Maine. And so I said, okay, that's, it's a fair point. I'm happy to come do it. So
Yeah.
that's probably the most outlandish scenario, but I think it's going to be a really fun conference.
That's coming up pretty soon.
That's coming up pretty soon. Yeah.
Ah, very exciting.
So that'll
And
be
I do want to actually, I know I said rapid fire questions, but I do want to leave us with one more philosophical question and just kind of get your perspective on this. What do you think are the downwind ripple effects of things like AI, commercial real estate, specific technology, just the availability of data and these tools? What do you think that more broadly means for the commercial real estate industry at large? And what about those effects what are you most excited about the future looking like with these tools coming online?
It's a great question. Those are almost two very different questions. What do I think and
I
what am
do
I
that.
excited
I wrap the two hard ones together and go fetch.
I like it. I like it. I mean, what do I think is going to happen? A handful of things. The industry is definitely going to be changing. I think what it comes down to now is commercial real estate. It's a very data and information, what's the best way to say it?
Driven.
It's an industry that relies heavily on commercial real estate data and information, and in a lot of ways that information is going to start getting more and more accessible. Even something as simple as, hey, commercial real estate brokerages, they're very used to people searching for, hey, what's price per square foot in this market on Google, and maybe Google links over there to their market report that they worked so hard on, and all of a sudden that potential client, they see your face, they see all this good information that you wrote about, the market and all these different facts. Now it's kind of changing, right? If you go to Google, it's going to pull a couple of stats from your market report and a couple from your competitor's market report. It's just going to kind of hand those to your potential client. They might never see your face, they might never see your company, they might never see
Yeah.
your logo. And so that's just a fact. The way that people access information is starting to change. But I think
Mm.
in commercial real estate specifically, you know, information is kind of siloed, it's kind of inefficient. And so there's always going to be some level of value added by, I shouldn't say some, there's always going to be immense value by the relationships that people in commercial real estate have with each other. I always
Yeah.
go back to, some broker who owns their own retail shop and they do all of their in-house leasing. They don't like to give that information up when anybody calls them. Definitely not,
No.
commercial real estate tech platforms, no offense. Definitely not. If an AI bot calls them and is trying to get that information, they don't want to give it to them,
Hmm.
but they will give it, to a fellow broker, that they're chummy with, and that, they know if they ever reach out to that broker, they might be able to pass some information along to them.
Hmm.
And there's a million of those examples, that kind of point towards the fact that relationships are going to be more and more important as it pertains to people kind of continuing to conduct business as AI starts changing all of these things around us. So that's a
Absolutely.
piece of it. Just the way that people access information is changing, but I think the value of relationships is going to continue to go up. And then what am I most excited about? I think, I kind of said it earlier, but again, just the fact that people are excited about AI and they're
Mhm.
excited about technology and commercial real estate for the first time, and just feels like we're not going to get left behind this time. I'm very, very excited about that. And
Jumping ahead by leaps and bounds. Commercial real
absolutely,
estate's here. Dang it.
exactly, we made it.
We
Almost.
made
We're
it.
getting
We
there.
made it. Oh man, Topher, this has been so much fun. I said it even before we started recording, but like I said, I've just been looking forward to having this conversation. You more than
Absolutely.
delivered. This has been a blast. Where can people get in touch with you if they want to see more of what you're experimenting with? Just ask you questions. What's the best way for that?
For sure. So I do write a monthly newsletter just on what's going on with AI, specific platforms that you can use for doing specific things in commercial real estate. And anybody could find that at chatcrenews.com. Feel free to sign up for that. You can find me on X. I'm at Topher now, spelled Tophernow. And if you just look for Topher Stephenson on LinkedIn, you can find me there as well. And happy to connect in any of those places.
Perfect. I love it. Topher, thank you so much. Really, really
Thank you
appreciate your
so
time.
much. Yeah, this was fun.
Yeah, and thank you everyone who tuned in today. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not miss the next one. Visit crexi.com/podcast and you can sign up to get the next episode delivered straight to your inbox. You can also subscribe to the Crexi Podcast on your favorite podcast app or check out our YouTube channel for videos of each and every episode. Take care and be sure to tune in next time.